Alrighty, we're back. Thanks for staying with us. You're listening to Planet Green Cheese, officially episode number 390. Now, I don't know what we promised before, but I think we're going to segue right into this topic that we've enjoyed discussing. And although the fight goes on and nothing's guaranteed yet, let me bring to the forefront the recent activity by the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act and its administrative functions by convening a panel to hear the petitions and testimony from the petitioners and other input to determine what, if any, of the conditions in these petitions that we filed should be added to the list of debilitating conditions. Or said another way, I want to talk about this recent last couple of weeks where the LARA convened the board that's required to meet by administrative rule and by the MMA's statute, and to address petitions that are filed and determine the viability, one would say, of the petition and whether it meets the criteria, and then take a vote on it. So that took place, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. The several conditions were petitioned for, and there was a testimony taken a couple weeks ago. And then, of course, of the petitions that were filed, not all of them got to the point where the board had a chance to review it, but there was 22 or 21, I believe. And it was recently, the panel was presented 22 new conditions and asked to recommend for approval. And citizens had testified, as I mentioned, the weeks before. And it was very compelling. I know we got a lot of feedback from people. There was a lot of good, decent turnout from the community. And I want to talk about it. We did a little bit last week, but it was an important aspect of it was what is the threshold for getting a petition granted? The first threshold for getting a new condition added to the list, really the first threshold is that the petition needs to meet a certain criteria, which is that it's supported by peer review articles supporting the medical use of marijuana to treat that condition. So any of the, for example, of the 22 conditions that were, or petitions that were accepted and sent for public hearing, of those they had met the criteria at a minimum to be able to have a vote. The next question becomes, when the board, or what is it, panel or board, what do we call it, panel, when the panel votes, what are they voting about? Does marijuana have to be a cure-all for the proposed condition? Are they expecting a threshold that it has to show that it has had clinical trials to support the premise of it? Does it have to be a certain amount of studies? Do they have to determine that it helps everyone but may hurt some people? Are these things that they have to worry about? No. The answer to all those questions is resoundingly no. What the board is doing is making a determination whether the identified condition, when treated with medical cannabis, has a therapeutic or palliative effect for that identified condition. If the board panel decides that it does, and there's a palliative or therapeutic relief, it can then place it, name it as one of the conditions. Thereby, it becomes a debilitating condition. That's the way that it works. That's the way that it's written. And
so it is written.
Unfortunately, our experience a couple years ago when we tried to have autism passed, and the board actually voted in favor of it, and then the director denied it. Many of the arguments that were being made, much of the discussion about it, was about these nuances of danger and concerns and not enough studies and things to that effect. That was then. Now, going into this this, and I would say this, in that discussion about autism, and despite the fact that these are not topics that are really relevant, like we didn't have to have clinical trials, we had supporting documentation and a plethora of patients and parents who could attest to the medical benefits, both therapeutic and palliative, for treating autism. The panel voted 4-2 in favor of it. One of those no votes was Dr. Eden Wells. What's her official title, Jim?
She's the Chief Medical Executive for the state of Michigan.
Chief Medical Executive. She's the top doctor in the state of Michigan, and she had voted against autism in 2014. But at that time, despite her no vote and another no vote, 4-2 forced the determination to go to the director of LARA, who at the time was Mike Zimmer, who denied autism, and he issued an opinion which was